Hey legend, today's episode is for you if you're wanting to break out of a porn addiction or if you're wanting to make sure you don't relapse into one that you've broken out of. Today we have Frank Rich on the line, and he's coach at Rebuilt Recovery, and he has coached thousands of men to break out of porn addictions and freer into their healthier and much more fulfilling lives. We get into our own experiences, our first exposures into porn, how we both broke free of porn, and really just share like some really great conversation and getting real with our own lives. And we talk about our fathers and male relationships that we have and just how we've built ourselves into the men today and how you can do that as well. We share some of our experiences around that I think you're absolutely going to love. But the main focus for today is how can you break out of a porn addiction and how do you make sure that you don't relapse? Enjoy it. Big Frank Rich, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining us.
Josh, good to be here, brother. Thank you for having me on, man.
What a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to jumping in today and talking about addictions of all types. And, I'm kind of feel like I'm going to be exposing myself a little bit because of the transitions that I've gone through with addiction. And we were talking at the start of, it's not just always about porn. Sometimes you fix one addiction and it finds itself in another area. So we'll dive deep into that, but I'd love to touch base and maybe if we can start pretty raw. What was your first exposure to porn? Like what was your very first exposure? Was it as a kid or a bit older?
Yeah, man. Well, I want to commend you, man, because I think that's a sign of real, masculine strength is being able to be vulnerable and kind of open up your wounds and process it. So, excited to kind of be in this conversation with you here today. But to answer your question, man, I remember it very vividly, and I think it's because obviously the journey of healing and recovery and freedom that I've been on, I've spent a lot of time there, and I know that early exposure. For a lot of the guys that we work with so there's clear evidence showing that early age exposure does potentially lead to the addictive behaviors later on in life. But for me, it was, 6 years old, man. I was a nosy little kid, 6. Yeah. I think, most kids are nosy. They want to be like their dad. They want to know, what's going on inside of dad's life. So I can remember one time, I don't think I was home by myself. My sister was probably watching us and, I made my way into dad's bedroom and underneath the sock drawer, there it was, man. It was a hardcore, and it wasn't even a Playboy at the time, man. I think this really shook me because at that age, you get exposed to some pretty hardcore graphic material back then, right? So this was, I'm 40 years old, man. So this was, late 90s. It was a hustler type of magazine, and I remember taking it and putting it in my brother's drawer. So I have a younger brother, so he actually got in trouble for it, not me.
How old would he be? You were 6. How old was he?
He was like 3. So yeah, and that was it, man. And I think, it was curiosity at the time because you're seeing something that you can't really understand and process. So you want to return back to it and see, why did this make me feel the way that it did? I see other people, I see other parts of their body. Why would this, make me feel the way that it did? And I thank God, man, to be honest, that I was born in the 80s and I didn't grow up in today's culture. Because like I said, we do know that early age exposure, most kids on average are getting exposed these days to pornography somewhere between the ages of 8 and 11 years old. But for them, it's not a magazine. They don't need to scrummage through that sock drawer anymore. The amount of kids that have access to a smartphone, to a tablet, and it's readily accessible. And, it's endless out there. And that's why I'm really passionate about the work that we're doing.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, it's making me think like I in my head, I thought my first exposure was like when I was 11. And it was actually, I was probably like 8 years old. And we moved out of our hometown to this other town where my grandma lived to look after her because she was getting older. And there was this, you don't really have them in America. They're called mulberry trees. They're kind of like these big, massive trees that have like blackberries on them, but sweeter, delicious. And me and my brother used to go and play in this tree and just like come back like covered in purple, like, every weekend. It was so fun. And there was this magazine that was like under the grass. And I just happened to like come across it. I was like 8, dude. And I remember just being that, and it was like pretty graphic. It wasn't just like, hustler or whatever. It was like pretty graphic, like 2 dudes, 1 woman, and like all this sort of stuff. And I was 8, and I'm just like in the middle of this country town and happened to stumble across this magazine, and then That was it went from 0 to like hardcore. It wasn't like I went from soft porn and then gradually, it was just like bang at 8 years old.
Here it is. Yeah. It's funny, man. I had Elliot Hulse on the show. He's been a guest a handful of times. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Elliot. Really big in the YouTube.
Was the reason I got into men's work.
Yeah, I probably figured that.
I was that 14-year-old kid listening to him be like, breathe into your balls. And I was like,
yeah,
into your balls.
Yeah. He shared a story the first time I interviewed him, and it was funny because the comments were like, why does every old man talk about, finding pornography in the woods? Cause Elliot shared that, and, it was the same for me. So it wouldn't have been around that age, but probably 8, 10, 11 years old, you find these forts out there in the woods. The world was different back then. Kids actually went out and played, and we rode their bikes, 10, 20 miles away from where we actually lived. But I can remember, man, there was a fort out there, and it was like every week there was a new set in series, man. I don't know who the homeless guy was or who the adult man that was going and leaving them for us, but we were really thankful at the time. So yeah, it's always funny to kind of, hear those stories.
Yeah, it's so funny. And then you never it's so funny because you imagine someone else probably had that experience, and then they probably interceded with that person at the same time, and you'd be like, are you going to walk away? Am I going to walk away?
Well, thank God we never ran into, the man, or, I mean, we had to steal him from the convenience. You could literally walk into a convenience store, and some of them, like the ones that weren't, more corporate, there'd be a section just outside, not even behind the counter, like outside. They'd have a black film over it, but you knew what it was. And have friend distract somebody over here, while the other one is kind of taking it. Yeah, I'm kind of exposed myself here a little bit for being a degenerate child, but when you're an actor, man, you do whatever you can to get it, right?
Yeah, totally. And then I think the point that I think was my first exposure, which was the internet, because it was like once I left that point, we went traveling, and got homeschooled for a little bit and stuff, and so it was like we were just if I didn't have a magazine, it was non-existent. But then we got a computer, and it was like I was waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning, 3 a.m. in the morning to be able to go and watch porn. And I was just remember it was so slow. It was so slow, but I was just so close. And I was 11, 12 years old.
Yeah, I was probably 14, 15 when we got dial up for the first time. And I remember, probably the first thing I looked for, man, is, where can I find some pictures? I mean, there was not even videos back then. And like you said, you'd be lucky if you completed one download before you were finished, if you know what I mean. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's hilarious. So then how did you kind of was there a moment when you realized, oh, this is a problem, or this is, detracting from my life? You started to become conscious?
Yeah, it was decades, man. It was truly decades. I probably knew through my 20s. I mean, to kind of, not hijack this entire thing with my entire life story, but, we shared early age exposure, internet 14, 15. I began to work in the wireless industry in my early 20s. I was a very early age adopter of a BlackBerry, which for the young audience out there was like the iPhone before the iPhone. I was probably one of the first 1,000 people in the country to have a color screen BlackBerry. Like the original one was just still kind of black and white text. But finally they created one with a glowing bubble in the middle, and you had full streaming internet. So I was a kind of a regional based sales manager. So I spent a lot of time on the road traveling from location to location, working in big malls. So we had nationwide, we had about 500 kiosks throughout malls all over. So, I'd attend these, malls. I'd walk in, check in on the store. Hey guys, I'm going to kind of, I'm going to walk around a little bit, maybe hit the food court up, just kind of see what's going on. How's just kind of the location performing back then, man. As I would take almost breaks, like an addict, like somebody else smoking cigarettes, but mine would be, I would go find like a Dillard's or Nordstrom where they had these big private restrooms. I mean, literally it's like a suite. You can kind of sit in there by yourself and watch and consume pornography.
Luxury.
So
Luxury on the road.
Yeah, man. So I probably was aware that wasn't normal, but I don't think I saw it impacting my life, because at 22 years old, 23, I ascended a ladder corporate. I had some success. I was making really good money. I was in incredible shape. I had a strong, social circle. I think So here's how I've tried to process this, man, is because I started battling with like anxiety and depression and just feelings of insecurity very young. I was a fat, overweight kid, come from a, quote unquote, bigger bone family. That was kind of the lie that we all accepted. So I always had these doubts about like, am I as good as other people? So I began to mask a lot of these things through bodybuilding, through material success, through, identifying as what I did, right? So if I can succeed in the world, maybe even if I'm struggling internally, others won't know these things about me. So I pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed it all down. Now I also struggled a lot just with drugs and alcohol. You give a young kid, 6-figure plus salary and a lot of money and kind of freedom, do what you want, lacking of any real moral code. I didn't really have any real, guiding light in my life at the time. And also I was trying to just kind of run away from a lot of the feelings. So I never looked at pornography as the root of any of that till my mid 30s. So it wasn't until 2018 that I really began to kind of look at it. I mean, it impacted relationships. I had to sneak around with the girls that I was with. There was one girl that, like she basically left me. And I didn't accept that it was something that I wasn't supposed to do. I bought into the lie. Oh, this is just what every guy does. Every guy watches pornography, right? My dad had it, and everybody else that I knew. There's the homeless guy that's leaving us magazines when we were kids. So I bought into that lie that it's something that every guy does. So it wasn't until my mid 30s, 34, 35 years old, that I actually began to really see the negative impact that it was having on my life. And honestly, Josh, it wasn't until I got on the other side of it and radically changed that I actually could connect the dots as holy shit. Like this was really destroying me from the inside out.
Yeah. It's like your gateway drug, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like it really starts to fuck up your brain. You don't realize, and then all of a sudden everyone starts with weed and then all of a sudden everything's spiraling. Okay. And then what was it that kind of, fractured that and made you want to quit or decide to stop?
Yeah, it was a series of events. 2018, I remember hearing a podcast, and it was host was a mentor, a mastermind, coach of mine that I was building an online fitness back at the time in the fitness space. And my coach hosted a podcast, and he brought a guest on, Michael John Cusick, who is the author of a book called Surfing for God. And this was the first time, truthfully, Josh, that I had heard two other grown men talk about struggles that I was wrestling and battling with. So this would have been sometime in the summer of 2018. And it kind of reassured, and it almost gave me the sense of like hope that, okay, had I been dealing with this, there is a pathway out of it, because was I just somebody that was going to, sneak around, and every time my girlfriend left the house, I went downstairs and locked the door and pulled a secret laptop out? Like I had really, weird, destructive behavior in around it, but I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to quit it. And so hearing two other men talk about it, I was like, okay, like there's some truth out there. There's guys that are willing to talk about this. Now let's begin to understand what's going on. So hearing that opened up my eyes. I started to explore a lot more of the research, stumbled across Gary Wilson's book, Your Brain on Porn. I was never like a Reddit guy. I wasn't somebody that spent a lot of times in online forums. I didn't really, my story isn't like yours. Like I didn't stumble across Elliot Holmes. I met Elliot Holmes, as almost as a peer. So for me, it was hearing those other men talk about it. Months later, I came to my faith, which was probably the most important part of this entire journey, was finding Christ and submitting my life to him. So that was October 22nd of 2018. And that day gave me peace and a sense of hope that whatever I had wrestled with, God will take it away and create a new life for me. And then truthfully, man, it was 4 or 5 months later, almost exactly 4 months. It was February 14th of 2019. I didn't take a lot of action on this thing. I understood what was happening, but it was still my own secret. I hadn't talked about it with anybody. I wasn't really sure how I was going to break free from it. And I'm sitting in my car one day with a very great friend of mine after workout. We used to all get together every Thursday. We'd have this big training group. We chop it up. We push each other really, really hard. And then usually we would go break for lunch after. This day, for whatever reason, I think it was divinely orchestrated. Me and my friend Zach, we had things going on later that day, so we weren't able to make the lunch meeting. I said, hey, Zach, let's just catch up for a couple of minutes, man. He's like, sure. So we're kind of sitting in my car having a conversation with the AC on, and he starts talking about some Wim Hof breathing exercise that he was doing to help regulate and control his sexual energy. He's like, Frank, I got to tell you, man, this is like really helping me with my porn addiction. And Zach was a Marine. Like, he was an alpha guy, like somebody I had massive respect for. So to hear him say he had a porn addiction, like it piqued me. And it was like, wait a minute, what did you just say? Like, I stopped him in his tracks. And I was like, you need to repeat that. He's like, bro, you have no idea, man. He's like, this goes back years and years and years to his time when he was, serving for the military. He's like, we had a tent and they would say, hey, if you're stressed, if what's going on here, like, you can't handle, go relieve yourself. And he's like, because of the way that was trained and conditioned him, he brought it back home to the States. And it had been 5-6 years, since he left the military, and he was still wrestling with this. But he's like, dude, I'm getting a lot of freedom out of this. And I stopped him once again. I was like, Zach, I don't know why you felt the need to share this with me here today. But you've given me an opportunity now to share something that I've been struggling and wrestling with. And I kind of unloaded it all on him. I've been addicted for 20 plus years. I was sneaking around in bathrooms. I've left social situations. I've avoided social interactions. Every time my girlfriend, so I was living with a woman at the time, almost every single time she left the house, I would go upstairs, our townhome. I could see her at the end of the road turn out of the neighborhood. The minute her car left the neighborhood, I ran downstairs, locked the door, went into the closet where I had a secret laptop, because I've been caught before. So I got smart, right? I'm like, if my girlfriends are going to search my history, they're just not going to know that I actually have a secret laptop where I watch pornography. So I'd watch that. I turned the lights off. I had like a ritual, man. Like, that's how deep I was in this thing. So I shared all this with him, and I was like, bro, this day is going to change my life, but I need a couple things from you. I'm like, will you just check in? Will you hold me accountable? Whatever the hell that means. I didn't understand it at the time. He's like, bro, I got you, man. Whatever you need. He's like, you're my brother. I was like, okay, sounds good, man. I was like, okay, well, I also need to tell Stephanie. And he kind of paused. He's like, whoa, you sure you want to, do this right away? We had been out dating for 3.5 years at the time, living together. Like I said, our relationship was rocky at the time, but there was always that hope that, because we would have the conversations like, maybe if we get married, some of these problems will go away. I was like, well, if we're actually going to make this thing work out, she needs to know this about me. So I had about a 30-minute commute on my way home, and I'm wrestling with it, dude. One side of me is like, don't tell her. The other side is like, this is the beginning of a new life and a new journey for you. I ended up not telling her that day. It was Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2019. Woke up the next day, and it just hit me. And it was like, you do it now or you're never going to do it. So she was up kind of getting ready in the morning. I had an office at home, so I was already up and kind of working in my office. I went into a closet, pulled a laptop out, walked into a room where she was getting ready. Said, Seth, I just need a couple minutes from you. If you can stop what you're doing. She's like, what's the computer? Like, she had never seen this thing before. I'm like, I know you know that I watch porn, because I've asked you if you want to watch it with me before. I knew she didn't have problems with me consuming porn, but she didn't understand the depth of the issue and the struggle that I was going through. I'm like, I know you know that I watch it, but I don't think you understand how big of a grip it has on me in my life. I start getting really emotional. She gets emotional. And I promised and committed to her that it was done and I was moving on for the rest of my life. And I said, to prove this to you, Stephanie, how serious I am about this, this is the computer I've been watching porn on for the last 5 years at this time. I need to get rid of it. I need to get it out of my life. And I took the laptop and I ripped it apart, like right down the middle where it folds. I'm like, see, there you go. And honestly, Josh, I think it was that extreme of an action that I took. It like there was, I'm big on symbolization, right? And I think that there was a moment where that showed me how serious I was, and I was cutting off the snake at its head. Like, there was no way this thing was going to enter its way back into my life. I went downstairs. It happened to be garbage day. I pulled my phone out. I sent a video message to another great friend of mine that was actually with me the day I gave my life to Christ, and I shared it all with him as well. And, I ended that video by saying, Josh, I don't know what's going to happen or what's going to come out of this, but I have a feeling that this is the beginning of something truly epic, and the world will change because of what I've done here. And, I watched, he watched me kind of, put the laptop into the garbage can. and the rest has kind of been history, man. You know, it wasn't an easy journey the first couple of months. I had an incredible support system. But one thing I wasn't afraid of was being open and vulnerable. And that's why I commended you at the beginning, right? Because at this point, Zach knew, you know, one of my dear friends, the woman in my life knew, and my best friend in the world, and really one of my close mentors, and it's somebody I really looked at as like almost like an uncle, father type figure, knew. So I started to share it with everybody, man, because one thing that came out of that is every time I opened up and talked about it and people accepted it, and they're like, dude, don't worry about it. Like, cause I got really emotional, man, every single time. Like I'm ending up in tears, like with grown men. They're like, dude, it's going to be okay, man. Like we've all wrestled and struggled with this. It's every man's battle, right? So it gave me a lot of peace and security knowing that people weren't judging me for it, and also knowing that I had a strong circle in my life. So I don't remember the original question, but that was kind of the journey to overcoming and getting free from all this.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Like that. And I've been involved in men's groups since I was like 20, 21. And like really, really consistently. And like I went and did, I don't know if you know the Mankind Project, they have a New Warrior weekend, which is like an initiation weekend. There's like 50 something guys there. Yeah. And there's like a part where you do a sexual share. And like, it was the first time, like what you said with your mate, where someone had been like, you know, who else watches porn? And it was like every single, or a struggle with a porn addiction, sorry. And every single hand went up. And it was just like so much hesitation to put my hand up and then be like, oh, wow, I'm not fucked up. And that allowed me to like let go of it. It was like this, because it was hidden and covered in shame, I wasn't able to actually let go of it. I was like, you know, shrouded in it and it was bearing me down. Whereas when I was like, oh, and it just became so much lighter. It's wild, isn't it? How so many guys just walk around with so many things in our lives, just not sharing, and we're all going through the same stuff. And that's what you need is a support network to really just move past it.
Yeah, well, the big thing I think for both of us there is, you know, that removal of shame from over us. You know, shame is you identifying as a bad person, or, you know, somebody that is negative due to the things that you do. And shame creates an identity that like you're not enough, like you're not good, right? It is like, it's not even an emotion. Like I see it as a state of being, right? So if you're walking around with this secret because you think that other people are going to judge you for it, you're never going to be able to truly love and just accept yourself. And I think that was probably a big part for both of us.
I'd love to know, like, maybe you could give 3 quick tips to somebody listening, a guy listening who's trying to get out. Like what's kind of your 1, 2, 3 steps to start that process of breaking off it?
Yeah. Get radically honest with yourself first, you know, speak truthfully about what the issue is. You know, I'll hear a lot of guys that reach out to me that say, I watch porn every single day. You know, I can't get rid of it, but I don't think I'm addicted. It's like, if you don't actually accept the severity of the problem, like you're never going to be able to find the solution for it. So I think radical honesty with self first is the first step. Step 2 is radical honesty with somebody else, just like you and I just shared, right? The minute that we talked about it with somebody else, like there was a layer of freedom that we were able to kind of step into, you know. And if you can't do that, even if you're finding success, you're still holding on to it yourself. Like that's because you're living in a state of shame. So you'll never walk in freedom if you're holding on to these things. If there's something in your life that you're doing and not sharing, that thing is holding power over you and you're still a slave to it. So radical honesty with self first, radical honesty with another second. And then I would say fast, like go on a long extended, you know, 2 to 3 day fast from food. Begin to deny yourself. It's going to build self-control. You're going to have to fight the urge and temptation to want to eat, which a lot of times will feel a whole lot like the urge to want to watch pornography. But the minute you make through that, you know, you make it through that, those feelings begin to kind of, you know, go away pretty quickly. They may come back a couple hours later, but it's like, oh, okay, I actually do have the will within me. I do have the power to not give in, and I can say no. And then, you know, obviously the spiritual growth, you know, I'm a man of faith here. And I think that there's a lot that we get spiritually when we do fast, but those would be the first 3 things, man, is honesty with self, honesty with another, and then begin to practice some fasting.
That's great. Yeah. I love the fasting piece and you know, how similar those feelings are, that urge. It's like just an urge, you know, that you can get familiarized with. What happens to your brain? Like, cause you've spoken to some experts, and what happens to your brain once you stop? Like once it gets back to normal?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you go through a rebooting, you know, rewiring process if you're intentional about what you're doing, right? So the term neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to change through experience. So I don't think just stopping watching porn actually produces a significant amount of change. It begins to unwire and kind of heal some things. I think it's the intentional work that you do in the process of pursuing freedom that actually creates the change, right? So understand that, if you've been struggling long enough, like there are deep neural connections that fire when something triggers you. That firing now creates a pattern of behaviors that leads you to consuming pornography. So a lot of this is kind of, it's programmed into us. So when we're triggered, we have to create new patterns, right? I think, James Clear does an incredible job in Atomic Habits of identifying the 3 steps of every habit, right? Trigger, behavior, reward. So we have to understand that those triggers are still going to be there. The things that triggered us to want to go watch pornography, quitting porn is eliminating that from your life. So what happens when those things happen? You have to create new patterns of behavior. So in time, through intentional work, what happens is the trigger happens and now you have healthier outlets. So when I'm stressed, angry, tired, dealing with lacks of feelings of self, insecurity, doubt, hopelessness, whatever those things are, some of those emotions will go away. I think hopelessness and kind of sadness will deteriorate, but you're still going to be stressed. You're still going to be triggered. You're still going to get angry. All those feelings are a part of the human experience. So when those things arise and come up in your life, what are the new patterns that you create? So you create new patterns, you create new neural pathways in your brain, and now you begin to operate from a sense of like pure joy and freedom. I love the quote from Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. Within that space lies our ability to choose. Within our choice rests our freedom. He's talking about it obviously on his grand scheme of life, right? But if we kind of zoom in a little bit and talk about freedom from pornography, most men are so unconsciously or subconsciously unaware of what's happening that when they're stressed, they're immediately running to pornography without having any full control of it. So we got to be able to step back from ourselves a little bit and begin to kind of see a third party perspective. Okay, when this happens, how can I pause for a moment? Can I develop a self-regulation tool to give me a space now to make a better choice for myself? The prefrontal cortex begins to heal. Obviously, I think there's better scientists that can kind of talk about that from kind of a brain structural standpoint. But if you've been caught up in it long enough, know that there is some gray matter that's been developed in your brain, and that will heal through time. One thing I've noticed is you see people differently. When you consume pornography, the part of your brain that is firing and going off is the parts that are associated with objects. So, I have a bottle here sitting on my desk, right? If I was going to go pick it up, my brain has to identify that as something as of an object that I can actually reach out and physically touch. When you interact in your community and connection, intimacy with people, whole different area of your brain is firing. What ends up happening though, as a guy that's consuming massive amounts of pornography, you begin to associate human beings as objects. This is where the word objectification comes in. You see women literally as sexual objects. Well, if we can recondition ourselves that women are in fact human beings and they're not here for us to use for our own pleasure, then we see them differently. The brain, the eyes are in fact just an extension of the brain. So as your brain heals, this is pure anecdotal in my experience and thousands of men that we've worked with, right? You begin to see the world a whole lot differently. So yeah, there's a lot that's kind of happening there.
Absolutely. What are some of the tripwires that you think, that you see guys get caught up with relapsing? They're doing pretty well. What are some of the things that usually trip people up and get them to relapse?
Isolation is one. Being alone. You're never watching pornography in a group of people. So it's usually when you're feeling lack of intimacy or lack of connection with others. So that's a big one. Stress is a big one as well. And even zooming in a little bit more, financial stress. The book Every Man's Battle, the author's name is I'm losing it right now, but I had him on the podcast and he came and actually spoke to our men. So he's been at this work for 20 plus years now. And he actually speaks to that. In fact, it's oftentimes financial stress and pressure. Maybe it's not that you're struggling financially, but even high performance guys that are running businesses and are building big companies, there's a lot of financial pressure and stress there. Can we make payroll? Where's the budget at? Right. So P&L sheets and stuff like that. rejection, and then just like not doing anything, just kind of like, I won't say isolation, but just still mind, like a still mind, is a big one there as well.
Mm. And what do you coach guys to? Is it just about that presence piece? Like, do you think that's the main thing if someone can focus on? Or, you touched a little bit on faith, and I think that seems to be having something externally that's bigger than yourself, that's more important than you. Could you, maybe share some insights around those?
Yeah. So I am a man of faith, and I think it guides everything that I do in my life. We have the biblical approach to our program, but one thing that kind of separates us from a lot of other just faith-based programs that are out there, they're going to say, read the Bible and pray. I'm a man of like taking action, and our program is rooted in, a holistic, fully integrated approach. So we look at your health, first, like your gut health. There's a direct tie from the gut to the brain. So all these neurotransmitters that fire, how you think, how you feel, through your thoughts, all begins within your gut. So that's why fasting is important, but also removal of a lot of like junk garbage food. So we take fully integrated holistic approach, but it's centered around a behavioral change component. What I like to say is we help you become the man that no longer needs porn. So it's not about stopping the behavior. It's becoming the man that when his life triggers him for whatever reason, he doesn't use that as an outlet anymore. So, it's going to be different for everybody. Some it is, finding a bigger meaning and purpose for your life, having a guiding faith that kind of maybe calls you, developing deeper connection and intimacy with others, both female and male relationships. There's a massive problem in the world right now with men struggling with real, male-based relationships. So we want to get you into a community. Self-awareness is a big piece. The development of self-regulation tools, though, as well. How do you process thoughts, feelings, and emotions when they come up in your life? So there's a lot there. And I think, that's why we've been able to succeed to the level that we have, because it's not going to be one single approach for everybody. Some may have to focus more on finding purpose, finding meaning in their life. Others are going to have to focus on getting healthy. Others are going to have to focus on building self-confidence, building a belief system just within yourself that I can actually overcome this. When you've been struggling with a behavior and breaking free for a decade plus, and you have a dozen failed attempts underneath your belt, there begins to become this unconscious limiting belief that I may never actually overcome this. And if you don't believe that you're ever going to truly be free, then something will always find itself in your life to make you return back to that pattern, right? So it could be a belief system, it could be relationships, it could be self-confidence, it could be I need a bigger meaning and purpose for my life, it could be I don't have any real faith in anything outside of myself. So it's not a single shotgun answer.
Mm. What happened in your life? You talked about seeing people differently. Like, what were some tangible things that happened in your relationships, maybe with your partner and with other friends, and just your life in general once you desexualized your brain?
Yeah. Well, the relationship that I was in at the time, we're no longer together. It didn't make its way through, I guess, my full recovery. There were other issues and just deep wounds that were kind of in both of us. We probably never truly meant for each other as well. It has created a much deeper connection with any woman that I got into any relationship with after, right? So that was one, because they were no longer just an object to me. Like, I actually began to see them for the person that they were. And I think that was for everybody. The biggest change that I saw was the acceptance of love from other men. You talked about the men's group that you were in. I'm sure there was probably a deep sense of just strong male masculine love. I rejected that for a really long time. And in fact, there was a point where one of my mentors, as we're getting off the call, he's like, "I love you, Frank," and hung up. And I texted him. I said, "Don't ever say that to me again." Now, when you get off the call with me, all the guys, like, they know, like when you meet me, like, it's a big bear hug, bro. Like, I want to share real masculine love with you. And I think that was probably the biggest change, is I had to accept myself first. Like, I had to love Frank. And that was the biggest change through this journey, is like, I began to really not just like myself, but I began to love myself. Because I liked myself for the things that I was doing, but I hated myself on the inside for a really, really long time. When I got free from all that, and I began to develop true, I guess you call it self-love, I was able to accept it from others. And now, man, it's how can I help others? For the first 35 years of my life, it's how can others serve me? Now my world is completely outward focused. What can I do to serve anybody in my life?
Pardon me. Do you remember the first time you were able to say "I love you" back to another guy?
Yeah, it would have been Josh, the same guy that told it to me. Probably, shortly into this journey. One thing with Josh, man, is he's been a rock in my life, man. I met him in the summer of 2017 at a business fitness mastermind, and he saw something in me that I'd never been able to see in myself, and he welcomed me, invited me into his family. I never had the greatest relationship with my father growing up. Today, we're great friends. I love him. But I think I struggled with having real masculine guideship in my life. And I think I saw some of that in Josh. I'm like, that's a guy that I want to be like. I want a family like that. I want to be able to step into a room and carry a presence and be a leader. So it would have been him, man.
Yeah, crazy. I remember the reason I'm asking is one of my best friends, I told him that I love him, and like his grandparents were dying, and he was raised by his grandparents. And so it was like, a big deal. And I was like, man, like, it's all good, dude. I love you, man. And he was like, I know. Just like, I just couldn't say that. It was so funny. And I was like, what? He was like, I know. And then just like awkwardly walked off. And I was like, what just happened? I was like, but it was like, it's so interesting. It's like the same time when I did a personal development workshop, and like, I just hugged my dad, and like my dad left, when we were like 9, 10, like didn't see him for so long. And I hugged him, and he didn't hug me back. His arms were like,
wow,
stiff boards. And it's so interesting how like, these things take work. It seems so easy in your head, and you're like, I can say I love you to someone, or I could hug somebody. But if we spend our whole life not doing it, it seems it's so socially, like, men and women say it to each other. It's in movies and everything like that, but we don't actually interact with each other so much. And it's amazing how healing and helpful it can be to people that you say it, because like we forget how little people have it said to them and get told that somebody loves them, especially in that male to male context is pretty wild.
I was still with Stephanie at the time, man. So it was probably 4 or 5 months kind of into this journey. So it would have been the summer of 2019, man. Like I was on fire, man. Like I just felt this massive sense of peace inside. Like I was walking in true freedom. Stephanie, my ex girlfriend at the time, we were at my dad's place, and we're leaving, man. I forget what I was there for, but I did the same thing. I went and gave him a hug, and he just stood there with his arms down, and she literally grabbed his arms and put them around my back. Like, it was like, hug your son. Like, he loves you. Now, man, obviously we hug every single time we're together. It's it's an I love you. My healing has led to, I think, probably him finding some healing in his own life. He's still got things that he's struggling and wrestling with. Like, I think a lot of guys from that generation did, but I don't hold any of that over him. I cherish every moment that I get with him. But he had a very, very similar experience. And it, showed me like exactly why I was the way that I was. I was modeling what I grew up in. Right. So
absolutely. Yeah. I'd love to, if someone's listening and they don't have a group of friends like you and I have got, where do you think you'd be if you didn't have those close relationships?
Honestly, probably not here. I mean, not saying not on this podcast. Like, I had a lot of suicidal ideation, man. And, I think it was probably knowing that there were people that care for me, probably my mom first. Like, I think, knowing what it would have done to her would have kept me here. But without that, man, it's hard to say, man. I wouldn't be doing anything I'm doing here today. It was the male relationships in my life that pushed me to launch the podcast. As I was getting free, I was running a small, online fitness business, very mediocre success, but I was the head of a marketing agency, and that became my purpose and passion. at the time, I had real leadership skills, man. I talked about in my early 20s, like I stepped into, regional sales base training in managerial position in my early 20s. So I had this innate leadership ability in me. So I kind of, I was invited to work in like a startup marketing agency, and we were growing rapidly, man. I mean, in like the span of like 6 months, we went from 5 employees to over 60, and just crushing it. So that was what I was doing, man. And I gave my life to it at the time. It was 10, 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it kept me busy at the time, and enabled me to help others step into their purposes within the company as well. But as I was talking more and more about it within my circles, they're like, Frank, you have a voice, and you have something that is going to share and potentially help others. Like, you need to start a podcast. So, it's through the men in my life that pushed me to launch the Superhuman Live. And then months later, man, they were the ones that kind of pushed me into coaching. They're like, Frank, you're getting all these men that are reaching out to you. I wasn't, guys were asking me, can you help me? Can you help me? Can you help me? And like I said, man, I didn't come from the men's group circle. Like, my male friends were guys that I met in a business mastermind. We just created real deep friendships, but it wasn't like I wasn't a part of like men's work ever in my life. So I didn't think that I was actually going to be able to do it, because I was like, I don't feel qualified to do a lot of these things. Well, you've done it in your own life. You possess real leadership skills. You have a background in health coaching. Why wouldn't you be able to do it? So I know for a fact I wouldn't have Rebuilt Recovery or the podcast without it. So what would I be doing? Probably still running a marketing agency.
Yeah, crazy. Do you have any tips for guys, same guy, same situation, for building those male relationships, like places to seek it, maybe conversations to start having? What are some things that you did that kicked off some of your deeper friendships?
Yeah, man, I don't think my journey is one to model, because I don't think a lot of, maybe they do, maybe great male relationships come out of business masterminds. But I think, with the access to what we have available online and the amount of men's groups that have risen up, find the coach, find a leader, find the mentor that resonates with you, and join a group. There's free groups that you can be a part of. You don't even need to pay these days. Now, if you have the ability, I think in person is always better than online based stuff, but there's an endless amount of online groups that you can be a part of. So find the one that resonates with you the most and feels like it's calling you. And then you don't have to worry about asking any questions. Like that's the job of the group, is to facilitate the conversations. What I would say is don't be the fly on the wall. Like, don't just join a group and then not participate in it, because it's not the joining of the group that ultimately changes your life. It's the work and the involvement that you put into it. So be open, be vulnerable. If you felt safe and comfortable in reaching out to that coach or joining that group, then you have to understand that is a safe and comfortable environment for you to have the necessary conversations that you need to have. So find whoever it is, man. I think we all are pulled to certain people because we see things in them that we feel is within ourselves. I think that's what real mentors are people that you see you and them just steps ahead, right? So if you believe that and that's your person, then they're going to show you the pathway to become the person that you want to be. So join a group, man. There's countless ones online. But like I said, if you have the ability to join something that's in person, maybe do a retreat like you did, if you can get away for a weekend or a week-long event. Because Tony Robbins talks about that, right? It's the immersion that actually creates the lasting change. So it's not like I'm gonna join a call once a month. It's like if you can get away for a 3-5 day event and fully immerse yourself into a brotherhood community, you will come out on the other side a transformed person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the that was your answer, because it takes the pressure off of having to be a social, master of some level and knowing questions and being able to interact. So you can just go to the group and show up. Yeah. And I think one of the most powerful things, like the last group before I moved, like the core 10 of us have been there for 5 years. And it's like the amount of trust that built by just showing up every single week for 5 years and, going off on weekends and stuff like that was just nothing I'd ever experienced, that consistency. And there are some guys that don't really share a lot, because they're quieter guys, but they just get, and then you watch them and then they finally crack. And like you said, as soon as you start to share, their whole life changes. Like, they'll show up and be sharing the same basic shit. and then they actually share something that's really going on, and then they go off and fix it because they have a container, that they're in.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we do have a lot of guys that struggle. I mean, I think groups and brotherhood, like this type of work is different than male friends. Like, so if you want friends, like the advice I give to the guys that come to us is identify who the friends are that you want, right? Whatever it is, you're the byproduct of the 5 guys you spend the most time with. So get clear on who you want to be and what type of friends you want to have. And then sometimes, you actually do have to step out, lean into the fear a little bit, develop the courage, right? Courage is only to be developed when you step into the fear of just going places. I moved from the city of Tampa more to suburbs, at the last summer. So 2022 summer. So I went all through 23. So I've been here for almost 2 years now, but I left a city where there was like a lot going on. I moved 45 minutes north where I knew nobody. I'm a guy that loves cigars, man. And I love the conversation that comes out of, sitting with a group of guys, maybe sharing an old fashioned and smoking on a great, stogie, right? I didn't have anybody to go with because everybody I knew was, 45 minutes to an hour away. So for like 6 weeks, man, I just literally went to the lounge by myself because I know that somewhere I will find my tribe. I will find the guys that will connect and resonate with me. Now, obviously, I've done a tremendous amount of work. I'm not afraid to talk about anything, right? So for me, that was a little bit easier. But I think if you're looking for real friends, like you just have to identify who those guys are, what they do. Are they guys that go to the gym? Are they guys that play pickup ball? Are they guys that, do attend a cigar lounge? Are they guys that go to live music events? Go to those places. And then once again, don't be the fly on the wall. Don't just sit there, with your head down in your phone. Like interact and engage and open up and connect and talk with people. You don't have to go super deep at first, but if you're being truthful and you're being your true self, right, that stuff will quickly come out.
Yeah, 100%. And so just putting yourself out there. Like one of my best friends now, Marcel, we met doing Muay Thai in Vancouver, like just before I left. Yeah. And we just happened to fucking like be paired up in this first intro class. And then like we've become such good friends. And now he basically replaced me in the group that I left. And like he's traveled down here twice in the last year to come hang out. Like it's like this amazing friendship came from just both of us happened to put ourselves out there on this particular day. And we happened to get paired together. And now we've got a great friendship for the rest of our lives.
Dude, I told you, man, I had a group of guys, man, we trained together every day. I think maybe if the cigar is not your stuff, if the music's not your stuff, the activity, man, one of my great friends now I met playing a men's league church softball. I used to play baseball back in the day. I wanted to be active. I wanted to be around other guys. I signed up independently, connected with a guy on the team the first year. We've been now kind of running our own team for the last 4 or 5 years, multiple championships. I spent time with his family. But yeah, I think the Muay Thai, the getting in the gym, my entire life, I found so many great friends being in the gym. You got to step outside of your bubble and step outside of your own little, small circle.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing is like those places can seem so intimidating, like, martial arts in particular, like whether it's jiu-jitsu or whatever. And they're the most inclusive places that I've ever been. Like literally, it's like they are the most inclusive spots. And you get people who are like so shy and like skinny dudes or whatever show up. Yeah. And everyone just like loves on them and thinks they're the best for showing up because everybody that's there knows how fucking intimidating it is showing up on the first day with no clue what you're doing. Yeah. It's like, and it's really interesting. Like, and that was a barrier for me. I didn't go for so long. I really wanted to do it, but I was like, fuck, I'm going to suck and blah, blah, blah. But it's just like, it's one of the best things I did in my life.
That's awesome.
So I'd love to dial back if we can to like kind of, you had this very particular date that you mentioned when you found your faith. And would you mind just sharing with us what happened? And because it sounds like it was a very transformative moment in your life. And what was that experience like?
Yeah. So I had shared, I met Josh. Josh was there with me on that day. I met him 14, 15 months earlier at the first business mastermind. So, I wanted to launch my fitness business back in 2017. I hired a coach, signed up for 6 months of coaching. What I got at the end of that coaching was an invitation to join an event up in Toronto. So I flew up to Canada to attend this, live and in-person event. I ended up signing up into the mastermind. That's a whole different story, but a few things happened there at the event. Obviously I met Josh, I met his wife, got a chance to spend, 3 days with them in the gym, having dinner, just at the event, sidebar conversations, like developed an immediate friendship and connection. with him. So, he was there kind of helping his wife launch her online business at the same time. So we were learning these tactics together. We were going through, additional coaching and additional training. So because we felt so connected, it's like, as we're both trying to kind of launch and scale and get these things off the ground, it's like we were the two that, outside of getting help from the coach, like we helped and supported each other. So it quickly developed like just a regular cadence of just conversations. And when you speak with somebody on a weekly basis, sometimes daily, it's like other things begin. There's only so much you can talk about business and marketing and funnels and click funnels and, opt-ins and email subscribers and all stuff. Only so much of that can happen. So you start talking about the other things that are going on in life. Josh would share things with his family, with his church. I would share things that were going well, but I felt like a lot of times as I was just complaining about, maybe my relationship with Stephanie, maybe things weren't going super well. So Josh got a deep kind of intimate look into my life. And once again, man, I didn't understand, like, cause I knew I was a degenerate, man. Like I was watching porn all the time. I was drinking, I was still at that time, not a drug addict, but there would be times like I would still go out and party. And I was like, Josh is this clean cut, business guy, beautiful family, young kids. I'm like, why is this guy so into me? And he said that for a long time, he wrestled with, sharing his faith. I knew he was a believer, but I think he said he knew that like it was his responsibility to at one point share God with me. He just didn't know when it was going to happen. So that October, well, actually, if I even go back a month prior, so I told you I didn't have massive success with the first online business that I tried to start. Like I felt like I was doing everything that was being taught. And I look back now as somebody that has helped a lot of people build online businesses and have created success. I can see why it wasn't working, but at the time it didn't make sense to me because I was applying all the things. I was lacking the real messaging component and I think the true authenticity. I was trying to become like a 0.2 version of somebody else's business. I was basically modeling what they were doing. It wasn't really me. And that was a big part of the struggles that I was having. But I can remember in September, like going to Stephanie, once again, bringing Stephanie in. I haven't talked about Stephanie so much in a really long time, but she was pivotal for this, beginning part of this journey. I can remember, one late night, like we're in the kitchen at our home, like Stephanie, man, I don't understand. Like, for one, I had another business that was coming close to closing down. It was what carried me for the first 2 years of the online business was the other company that I was running, but I was shutting it down in the next couple of months. It was about to go all in. I was getting kind of worried because I'm like, there's not a whole lot left. Like if I lose all the income and revenue from that side, like I only have like a short runway here. And I was beginning to get afraid of like what we were going to be able to do. I'm like, I'm applying everything. I got the ClickFunnels stuffed out in everything that I'm taking action on. Like maybe we need to go to church. I'm like, all these guys in this group are going to church. Maybe that's the missing piece. Like that's how dumb and naive I was at the time. I was like, there's a secret to my business inside of a church is what I thought. What was interesting is Stephanie had like a Catholic upbringing that kind of had some wounds imprinted on her, but she wasn't against it. Like she was like, okay, like if that's what you want to do, like I can support you in that. But there was a seed that had been planted because I was like, okay, like I'm open to maybe figuring a little bit about that. I'm open to kind of exploring and going down that pathway. We didn't take action with it at that point. But like I said, the seed had been planted. So October's kind of turned around and Josh has a trip that he's got to come down for. He was a corporate guy running his wife's business. So he was coming down for his corporate job to be in Orlando. He said, hey, Frank, I'm going to be in Orlando for this week. Let's find a day that kind of works for both of us. Why don't you head over? The trip from Tampa to Orlando is about 60 minutes. So it wasn't a long commute for me to get there. And I was fired up, man. I was like, awesome. I'm going to see one of my best friends. We have this remote based, relationship. We'll hang out, we'll have lunch, we'll chop it up. We'll talk a little bit of business. We'll talk life, maybe some sports, all this stuff. I think he knew he was coming for something different. So when I picked him up at his hotel, I said, let's head downtown Orlando. That's kind of where like all the action is at. He was staying just outside of the city there. So we're pulling downtown, and anybody that's aware of downtown Orlando, where the Magic play, Amalie Arena, the street that runs parallel to that is Church Street. It's a big party street. I used to live in Orlando for a short time. Great clubs, great bars, great restaurants, great nightlife. I'm like, I know there's something that we can find if we go to Church Street. So I parked the car. We started walking down Church Street and found this like old hickory style steakhouse. I said, there's our spot, dude. Like, just being a meathead like I am, man. I'm like, that's where we're going to go. So we sat down, far back in the restaurant. It was like a Wednesday afternoon. So there wasn't a whole lot kind of going on at the time. So we, kind of had the area all into ourselves. There were maybe 4 other people in the restaurant. So server came up and, Josh is like, just bring us some water. We're going to be here for a while. And I was like, it's kind of a weird thing to say. And he sits down and he looks me in the eye. He's like, can I ask you a couple questions? And I was like, absolutely. He said, how's your relationship with your father? And what do you know about God? And it kind of shook me, right? Because like, who asked those questions, like right at the beginning of a lunch conversation? So I kind of explained to him, never had the greatest relationship with my dad. He was always in the home. He wasn't an absent father. He was there, but he wasn't present, I think is probably the best way to kind of describe it. He was struggling with some of his own issues at the time. And I was like, I don't really know a whole lot about God. And I had kind of shared with him, I talked about going to church, like a month ago. So we sat in that restaurant, man. What felt like 5 minutes, it was probably a couple hours. And he just shared his faith. He shared the journey of, from basically Adam and Eve all the way to Christ, and how he knew that there were things that I was wrestling with because he could feel it and see it kind of inside of me. And if I was willing to, allow Christ to come into my life, he would bring me the peace that I was always looking for. We finished up lunch and he's like, what do you think, man? He's like, I was like, I think I want to do this. Like, I'm ready. Like, I feel like this is the missing piece and missing part of my life. So he's like, all right, we got to get out of this restaurant. He's like, I had something for you at the hotel, but let's go somewhere. I want to pray over you. So we actually stepped out of the restaurant, and like sitting adjacent corner across the street was a history center, like with a big fountain, like a museum type of thing. Like we had like a walkway up and there's a big water fountain. So we walked right over there. He's like, Frank, I want to pray together for you. I want to pray for you. So, close my eyes. He put his hands on my shoulder, and accept the Holy Spirit into my life. And, he said he felt it. Josh is real prophetic, man. Like, he's able to see things, through God that I can't experience the way he talks about it. But he's like, I felt a sense of peace. Like he was holding onto my shoulders. He's like, you felt calm in the moment. I was like, and I felt light. Like I told him, I was like, I feel light right now. So that was it, man. October 22nd, sitting outside the History Center. I took him back to his hotel. He had flown down with a Bible, a brand new one. And he was bringing it for a guy, Frank. He thought Frank was going to be in his conference, not realizing it was going to be me. He wrote a little, note in there for me, signed it, dated it. And, he said the world will never be the same because of this. So yeah, that was the journey, man.
Was there anything in particular that, tipped you over to really wanting to believe and go into it? Or did you feel like you were ready? Like, was there still skepticism in there? Like, what were you feeling and going through in that conversation?
I was ready to accept it and explore it. I didn't know what it meant. I had been to church a handful of times growing up. I identified me and our family as like not church people, right? Like there's those people over there. That's why they do good. We're this family over here. We have uncles that are drug addicts. We have uncles that are alcoholics. Like we're degenerates, right? Church isn't for degenerates. Like, and that's how I saw it. But I think so through the mastermind, what was interesting is the guy that ran the fitness mastermind that I was in, his dad was a pastor. And in that first event up in Toronto in July of the year prior, his dad spoke to the event, and seeing the relationship that this grown man had with his father, like that was a seed that was planted. Then I came back home and I got connected with men that were friends with the coach, and that became the guys that I worked out with on a regular basis. Well, through time, there was a different way that I felt when I was around them. They were all men of faith. And they weren't the clean cut. Like they were like, okay, they got some of the same problems that I do. So I was completely ready for it. I didn't know what the journey was. I didn't know that it was going to be as much work for me. Like I was like, okay, Jesus, like you got this, man. Like let's go. It was like, no, this is the beginning of your salvation, right? You're saved. Now we have to actually you begin to put in the work. So yeah, I didn't know what it was going to lead to, man, but I was 100% ready to take that leap.
Mm.
Because I'd always been searching, man. You know, I've been a big personal development guy. Tony Robbins, you know, all this stuff, man. Like from my teenage years. Because like I said, man, I struggled with a lot of things growing up: doubts, fears, insecurities, not feeling whole and complete. So I was always searching for a meaning in life, and that's what I went to personal development for. And it's interesting because Josh wrote a book called The Standard: Discovering the Jesus as a Standard of Masculinity. And he talks a lot about how literally the personal development, self-development space has just hijacked everything from the Bible and removed God out of it. And the deeper I get into my faith, I see it that way. You know, there's incredible stuff out there, man. Like, I'm not against reading personal development books. Like, I think there's great tools that we can get from some of these things. But if it's not rooted in the real, true biblical truth, I think you have a big part that you're missing. And that was me. Like, how the hell had I read 500 books, you know, in my life up to that point and still lived in an utter mess? It's like, because it lacked the foundation, in my opinion, of the real truth of where all this stuff came from. I mean, even guys like Jordan Peterson, man, like, I'm not sure if you're a fan of him, the way that he talks about, you know, the Bible and how it's just, you know, literally it's the truth of truth. Like, we can't have truth if you don't understand how those stories tie into how we all see the world today.
Mm. What do you have some tangible kind of thoughts around, you know, because you read all this personal development, but then there's the Bible and Jesus and truth. What does that actually like look like for you? What did that look like? What was the actual difference? Was it just having like a backing spiritually and understand that something else was there, or what did that look like?
I think a big thing is knowing and understanding that even though I feel equipped to do some things and, you know, I understand all this stuff, like, I'm never going to be a perfect human being. I think self-development was trying to remove all the flaws from who I was and how I saw myself. And I think what Christ has done is say, you will never be perfect. You will always be flawed. You will always have inadequacies in you. And that's what I'm here for, is to wash all that away so you can walk in freedom and not allow any of that to hold power over you. It gave me peace that, hey, I'm never going to be a perfect human being. I'm still going to chase perfection, but I'm never going to reach it. So it was the peace that came with the salvation for me, and Christ dying for my sins and dying for me and shedding his blood. I said, okay, I was perfect. You're not going to be. I'm going to give my life so that you can walk in the freedom that truly an only perfect person should experience.
Mm. Yeah, it was so interesting. I was listening to like because I grew up going to church. I'm not religious now. Like, I hated it. Mum dragged us. It was fucking awful. And like, I remember so many fights, like going to church, my brother screaming and just fucking kicking the can. And I was listening to this Sean Ryan episode. I'm not sure if you know that he does these like long interviews with like military veterans and stuff. And there was this older guy, I think he was from the Vietnam War or maybe, something like that. And he was like, there are no atheists in foxholes. And I was like, damn. I was like, that's fucking heavy. I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, dude. He's like, you can be having all these conversations about religion and stuff like that. And when you're getting shot out, he's like, everybody's praying. And I was like, damn. I was like, that's fucking heavy, dude. Like, when it comes down to it, like, everyone in that moment is like, please God, you know? And it really, like, I think it took it, like you said, from this picture and, you know, maybe want to kind of like, been thinking about it more, of just like this experience I had where everyone's trying to be perfect and everyone shows up to church and is their perfect version of themselves and is fully fake. And then you're like, the kids are hating it, but all the parents are like, oh, like pretending like with their little fucking triangle, you know, sandwiches. And then you like hear these like these guys that have just like killed, been shot at, done and like pushed themselves to their absolute limit. And like, they all believe in faith and God. And you're like, oh, there's actually what like life, that's the extremity of what life is about. Mm-hmm. And I think it was so hard to believe as a kid because you're like, this isn't life. This is fake. Yeah. Like, why do all these fake people believe in something? Like, it has to be fake.
And the church can be a dangerous place, man. You know, if you do lack that experience, if you do lack your own pursuit of what God means to you. So I attend church, man. I was there yesterday. I love what it brings to me. I'm not sure I would identify myself as like the traditional religious type of person. I've seen too much of the world to just accept the way that some things are talked about within a church. And I'm not knocking it. I think that it's a great tool and resource for a lot of people. I think it provides a lot of comfort for a lot of people. But for me, it's about the relationship that I have with Christ as the guiding light for who I am, and knowing that this world that you and I are experiencing, this material, there's no way that this is all of it. Like there's something that has set this in motion. There's something that is guiding us through this. Some of that is found within the Bible, I think. But yeah, I think it's the integration of kind of all of this. I mean, I did have a radical experience with God 3 days after quitting porn, where like I truly felt the presence of him in my life. So I talked about, it was Valentine's Day, kind of the day that it all kind of shook me. That was a Thursday. Friday was the day I told Stephanie. Friday was the day I ripped the computer apart. By Sunday, I was supposed to be attending church, and I was already kind of actively going regularly. Stephanie was attending with me every once in a while. We had a massive fight that morning. At this point, I'd gone, 3 days without porn, which at that time had been the longest I'd gone in probably decades. And I was new in this journey, man. And I didn't know how to handle and process like the things, because I'm getting angry and frustrated. She's pushing back on it. Now we're already late. Now we're going to miss it. Like, you've ruined my whole day. You've ruined my whole life. I hate you, this, that, da, da, da. I got really mad because like she was fiery, man. She would push back as well. I ended up kind of like, it got to the point where I'm so angry, like I'm punching walls. Like that was where the rage was at, as I was hitting things. The third, hit into the wall, I hit the stud, man, like the big 2x4 that runs down the drywall. It shattered my hand, man. I still have, like, the way that it's set and healed was never perfect, but the minute I pulled my hand out, it was like double the size. And I collapsed because now I have a broken hand. This is all your fault. I don't want to be here. I didn't have an understanding of it. God, just kill me. I don't even care if I'm here anymore. Just take me from this place. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. I saw God through her, because she literally picked me up and she said, "You're being stupid right now, but I love you and I'm going to take care of you." And her saying she was going to take care of me was like God saying, whatever you're going on for the rest of your life, I'm going to take care of you. And you don't have to worry about any of these things. You're still going to have to do some stuff. You're still going to have to fight. You're still going to have to push, and you're going to have to chase becoming who I made you to be. But you don't have to allow it to control you like it has your entire life, because my emotions and feelings always controlled me. We fought on the way to the hospital. I told her, take me to a clinic. She's like, "You can't fix a broken hand at a clinic." I said, "Yes, you can. Just take me to the clinic." So she took me to a clinic. We walked in. They saw my hand. They said, "What are you doing here? Go to the hospital." She's like, "You're a dummy. Once again, I'm going to take care of you. Trust in me." And I was like, "Okay, God, I'm going to trust in you right now." So we get to the emergency room. It's hours, bro. Like, it literally felt like I was there for 2 days. And during that whole time, man, she's sitting on the other side. Like, she wants nothing to do with me. Like, she's just over there. She's like, "You're an idiot. You're the reason why we're here, but it's all going to be okay." So I'm sitting there, man. I'm praying. I'm thinking about it. Just, there's this peace that's coming over me, man. Like, just massive, massive calm and peace. They pull me back to the room. They check all your vitals, heart rate, all this stuff. My resting heart rate was like 52. I had a broken hand, and I had been in a massive rage hours before. They're like, "Why is your heart rate only 52 beats right now? Like, this is not normal." And the only thing I said is like, "I feel the peace of God right now." Like, I truly had a radical experience in a hospital room where God was like, "It's going to be okay. Like, you're fine. And I got you in this thing." So I've had some experiences like that, man, even in these last couple of years. I don't want to ever feel like I'm projecting anything in my belief system upon to anybody. I appreciate you kind of navigating this conversation with me. You're doing an incredible job. But yeah, when somebody says that they're an atheist or they don't believe anything outside of what they see here, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you spend time like in nature. I think it's easy when you're here and like, disconnected from nature, but you go for a walk and you're like, "Yeah, that's pretty fucking wild." Like, it's pretty fucking wild. But
that's really, there's been a handful of moments I've felt closer to him there as well, man. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you feel like young men, like guys, need to hear nowadays, 2024? Like, what do you feel like guys need to hear?
Man, they need to hear a lot, man, but probably you matter, man. I don't know what they're being told, but I don't think they're being told the right things. I think they're being told that, they probably don't matter. maybe some of them, maybe I'm projecting that onto people. I do think that's out there somewhere. You matter, man. And you're here for something, and go find it. You have gifts that are uniquely yours. Like there's things that we all do better than others, just innately. There's a reason why you can do that. Talked about 22 years old, man. I never thought about like getting into a, corporate leadership kind of transformational position. But there's a reason why I do what I do today, because it's a gift. It was something that was placed inside of me that I can use. So you matter, and you have gifts, and you have things that are uniquely yours. So get out from, your hole, whatever, wherever you spend your time, and go chase that and share it with the world.
Thanks, brother. What a perfect way to finish. Thank you so much.
Awesome, bro. Love you, man.
Love you too.